Hey, joining us now, the number one pollster in the United States. He gets it right more than anybody else. Got the last election right with Trump, the one before that with Obama and Romney. This guy is always right. That's why we love having him on. ScottRasmussen.com. This segment brought to you by the Job Creators Network. More information on the Trump economy and how entrepreneurs start jobs and employ people. And the engine of small business is the Job Creators Network. They've been on the front lines forever. Go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com. Scott, great to have you here. We're live in Miami.
Well, I'm live in New York, but it's great to talk to you on this Friday morning.
All right, Scott, let me tell you this. I'm going to get to all your polls in a minute because there's a couple of really cool ones out there. And especially we want to get to the citizenship question that John Roberts screwed the conservatives on again last night. Just like Obamacare, and goes with the liberals on it. But let me just ask you this. Unrelated to your polling, because I know none of that is out. I can't wait till next week when you're on. Who do you think was the big winners and losers in this 2 days of debates?
Yeah, I think the biggest winner was Kamala Harris because she got her moment to shine, and she took advantage of it. And right. I don't know what's going to happen in the polls. Our first complete post-debate poll will be released on Sunday, and we'll see if she moves up a little bit. I think Elizabeth Warren may have gained a little bit of ground. And I think ultimately the two biggest losers were Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. They're two older white men in a party that wants to become younger and more diverse, and it's certainly its progressive base is moving in that direction. Whether it's enough to actually change the race over time, we don't know. But Joe Biden was on the defensive last night, and you saw some ways that he could lose the nomination. I think the bigger picture, though, the big winner probably was Donald Trump in the sense that the Democrats have moved very far to the left. Every Democrat on the stage last night said they think we should be providing health care benefits for illegal or undocumented immigrants. Only 26% of the American people agree with that. The idea of having open borders is supported by less than 20% of the American population. And immigration is becoming a central issue, both how we deal with the border and how we deal with people who are already here. The Democrats are making it very easy for Donald Trump to capitalize on that issue.
I mean, I think there's probably another 3 states that the Democrats have put in play for the Trump organization's effort in 2020. Just after these debates, Minnesota, in New Hampshire, and Nevada. I would put all these 3 in play now after this. I want to get to your Pulse poll, which is sponsored by the Job Creators Network and ScottRasmussen.com. And you say that as last night's debate revealed, 2020 Democratic presidential candidates are almost universally in agreement when it comes to support for Medicaid for all. But you did a poll, and it showed, well, that's not really what a majority of Americans want. Explain.
Well, if we ask about Medicare for all, 63% say, yes, we like that idea, and it's consistent with the view people want. They want America to work. They want people to have access to health insurance. But when we ask them, does the Medicare for all plan that Bernie Sanders and others are talking about, does it require the elimination of private health insurance? Well, a lot of people don't know that. And when we ask again, if you knew that happened, if you knew that private insurance companies were eliminated and you'd have to go through the government, all of a sudden that 63% support flips to 63% opposition. It is hard to describe how unpopular the idea of banning private health insurance companies is. It's an idea the Democrats are buying into right now. Bernie Sanders and many other leading candidates have been pushing this. And the fact is, voters want more choice, not less.
Basically, if I could just paraphrase this, when you ask a voter, hey, are you for Medicare for all? Sure, why not? If you say, well, are you for Medicaid for all, but you have to give up your private health insurance, the numbers flip upside down.
Exactly. And because, as John Delaney noted 2 nights ago, 7 out of 10 people rate their own health insurance coverage as good or excellent. I mean, the idea of switching to a single-payer system means taking the existing health insurance away from 7 out of 10 people who are happy with it.
It's unbelievable. Also, John Delaney said that he checked with 100 hospital CEOs across the country, and which this is going to come back to haunt them. There's no question. He said, I checked with 100 CEOs that run hospitals across the United States, and all 100 of them told me that if Medicare for All actually passed and under the legislation, hospitals would get paid the Medicare reduced rate, he said all 100 of them told me they go out of business.
Yeah. Well, look, people do expect that if we had to go through a government system, that the cost of care would go up and the quality of care would go down. And that's, because people like choice. They don't like relying on the government as a sole provider for anything.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network live in Miami. We are with the number one pollster in America, Scott Rasmussen. Go to scottrasmussen.com. He's live in New York today. Hey, by the way, Scott, I bought your book. The sun is still rising. I just bought it the other day. I went to Amazon. I got it. You can go to your favorite bookstore. I just started reading it. I got through the first chapter, and then I got busy, but it's sitting here right by me. So it's pretty good. Like, I like the opening, but next week when you're on, I'll have read the whole thing, and then I can give a critique and tell people whether to read it or not. So far, though, I like it. But I did buy it, Scott. Right?
Good. Well, that's a great start, and I'm glad you got through the first chapter.
It was good.
And it expresses the views that a lot of people have. Right now, 70+% of Americans say our political system is broken, but 58% believe our best days are still to come, and that's right where I am.
Well, you've also got you got a nice writing style, so I did like that. We're with Scott Rasmussen, number one pollster in the U.S. Buy his book, The Sun is Still Rising. You can get that at Amazon. Scott, let's get to one of the most recent polls you did. Ties into what happened yesterday, the Supreme Court ruling. John Roberts going with the liberals. You never know where he's going to go. Throwing out, so far, temporarily, the question on the census form that, are you a citizen? And you did a poll that shows that Roberts is siding with the liberals is not in step with mainstream America.
Well, that's right. And obviously the justices aren't up for re-election. They don't look at polls the same way that an elected official would. But 73% believe it's appropriate for the census to ask the question about citizenship. Only 18% think it's a bad idea. When we break it down on a partisan basis, 89% of Republicans believe it's appropriate, 68% of independents, and 64% of Democrats. And I think, it's not just asking a question. The reason this battle will eventually get so heated is most Americans, 62%, say that when we begin to calculate congressional districts, we should only count people who are here in the country legally.
Right.
And that would have a huge impact on the distribution of congressional seats. It is something that people on the Democratic side of the aisle are really trying to avoid.
Well, listen, the Supreme Court ruled, I don't know how they're going to overturn this before the census, but Roberts again siding with the liberals on it, saying the question comes out. And basically now you reward states for sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, sanctuary this, sanctuary that. And now there's an incentive to house people that are here illegally because you get more money and you get more representation in Congress. And all the states that are doing that are blue. And so you get a better opportunity for the Democrats to keep control of Congress. So the whole thing is politicized. But you ask an average American and you say, should that question be on the census form? And they're like, well, of course it should. Because why are you counting people that are here illegally that shouldn't be here? I mean, we live in a bizarro world, Scott. Some of this stuff is just head-scratching. All right, I want to get to last week, or just a couple days ago, 3 days ago, we came out with a poll. The legacy-lying fake news media is giving us these polls showing Bernie Sanders ahead of Trump by 15 and Biden up by 20. You do a poll, though, and it's a virtual tie. What's up with that?
Well, the numbers for us, Biden 41, Trump 40, or Trump 40, Sanders 39. The biggest thing that we do differently is we're asking people, who they would vote for, and if the choice was between these two, maybe somebody'd like to go for a third option, or maybe they're not sure right now. We are very early in this process. Many of the people who will be the ultimate decision makers have not engaged, and there's a big undecided group. If you push some of them, a lot of them might say, yeah, I'm kind of leaning against President Trump, so you'd get a bigger lead. But at this point in time, way too early in the process for that. You have to recognize that about 15%, maybe up to 17 or 18% of voters really aren't decided, and it's close, and the fight is for that group of people. I should say the other thing that's really fascinating about that poll is consistently in every other poll we've done, we do this every month, Joe Biden has had a bigger lead over Donald Trump. It has fallen. I suspect it's partly because of some of the attacks he's getting and shifting his position on things like the Hyde Amendment he's shifting from a popular to an unpopular position. And I think that's one of the great dangers Biden faces if he wins the nomination. He will be pushed so far to the left. Every time he goes a little further left, it helps President Trump.
Well, maybe he needs a Bill Clinton's sister soldier moment. Remember, Clinton in the 92 campaign feared that, and Clinton decided to roll the dice and admonish the super left liberals in his party, and he did that with Sister Soldier in completely rejecting whatever she was saying. I don't remember the specifics of it, but I remember that moment, and I remember saying to myself, boy, this guy's really smart, because he's taking a shot that he's going to be the nominee, and if he is, he's going to be able to campaign as the centrist against the incumbent, which he didn't. He won. So,
well, I think you're right on that, but I must say, to paraphrase an old debate line, Joe Biden is no Bill Clinton when it comes to campaigning and debating. I mean, he is. Bill Clinton was a masterful political figure.
He was good. He might have been the best ever, right?
Yep.
Obama was good, but Obama, there was a lot of factors going into Obama's win. Bill Clinton won that race on his own, and being an incumbent president coming out of a successful war and clobbered him. So Bill Clinton, the master, no question. Look, I didn't think Joe Biden got knocked out last night, but I agree with you that you saw his vulnerabilities, and you really saw last night how he might not be the nominee, right? Is that a fair thing for me to say?
Yes, and let's be clear on this. Joe Biden is the front runner coming in, a heavy front runner. 54% of Democratic primary voters think he is going to be the nominee. This was before the debates. In our polling, he was up by 12 over Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris were the only other candidates who topped the 5% level. We'll see if these numbers shift right now, but as much as the press and a lot of other folks get worked up about these debates, most Americans are not tuning in yet. Most Americans are not watching the debates. It'll take a little while for this to filter through. And I think the challenge for Joe Biden is not one debate, but if this becomes a theme, if every time they have a debate, if every day there's something else knocking him, that could take a toll.
Right, because eventually it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, right?
Right, exactly.
Right.
On the other hand, Ronald Reagan had a bad debate against Walter Mondale one time, and people thought he was too old, and he came back with that great line about, "I'm not going to let my opponent's youth and inexperience be a factor in this campaign." And, he wrapped things up right then. But in truth, he had already wrapped it up long before. All he did was recover from one bad performance. Right. Joe Biden can certainly do that.
I think he can, and I think he's going to learn from this. But, history shows, though, that Biden is a terrible campaigner. I mean, he ran 3 other presidential campaigns, all 3 debacles, all disasters, and he's a gaffe machine, and he's not very good on his feet. I mean, although I thought who did he debate? One of the vice presidential debates, he clobbered his opponent. What was that, Ryan, where Ryan was drinking the water?
Right.
I forget who the second one was. I guess that was the governor from Alaska, Sarah, whatever her name is.
Sarah Palin.
Sarah Palin. Oh, my God, I forgot her name. How time shifts.
But look, I think Joe Biden can be an effective debater, especially in a one-on-one situation. The question is whether he can sustain a campaign on his own. As Barack Obama's surrogate, vice presidential nominee, he had some good moments. He obviously had some gaffes. But it's a different thing when you're the guy on the top of the ticket. And
that's right.
I don't discount him, as I said, but this race is not over. It is not a lock for Joe Biden.
All right, Scott's number of the day, 26%. 26% of voters nationwide believe America's political leaders respect the voters they are supposed to represent. That's a pretty low number, Scott.
Well, it's a low number, but perhaps even higher than it's deserved. I don't know. 60% believe that they don't show respect for voters. And this is consistent with a lot of other data. People tend to believe, most Americans believe that the federal government is not primarily concerned with the interest of the American people. They're primarily concerned with the interest of the federal government. So it's a little discouraging along the way, but that's where the world we live in.
Scott, thanks for being with us. Scott Rasmussen, number one pollster in America. Here's what you need to do. Go to scottrasmussen.com, scottrasmussen.com. Make that your favorite page every day. Go there. He's got great poll numbers. You got to be there, scottrasmussen.com.